So let's get into it. This is every grammar topic that the digital SAT is going to cover. In this video, we're going to be talking about the first three, and we're going to touch on pronouns a bit. So if you don't know what any of this means, that's completely okay. These are just the technical terms that the English majors use to describe what we already automatically do when we speak English. So let's get into sentences. So there are two types of sentences that you basically have to know. There's independent and dependent clauses. Independent means a complete sentence, the bird is flying. Dependent means not a complete sentence, because the bird is flying. You can't just say because the bird is flying without any other context. But if you combine the two, the bird is flying because the bird is flying, that becomes an independent sentence. So an independent can be made up of an independent and a dependent. So a problem related to sentences on the SAT is going to be fragment problems. This is basically a sentence made up of anything less than an independent clause. They're basically testing if you can catch that the sentence is not complete. So how do we fix it? There are two ways. All you have to do is connect it to an independent clause to make it complete, like we did in the last page, or you can add in the missing subject or verb to make it a complete independent sentence. So, example. To boost the number of women in STEM fields, including electrical, chemical, and industrial engineering, it feels like something's missing, right? So what are we gonna do? This is method number one. We're gonna connect it to an independent clause that already exists so that we can make it complete. The senior female executives also act as mentors to young women. That is a sentence that could stand on its own, and that is a completely independent clause. So combining the two makes it an independent clause. Example 2, from driving hard for every attempted shot to deftly throwing the ball to most open defender, it's missing something again. What are we gonna do? Connect it to an independent sentence to make it complete. The goalie was saving her team at a time when they needed her. If you notice, that last part of the sentence could stand on its own without needing the dependent part at all. But by adding that to the dependent part, it becomes an independent sentence, and it's good now. So, example 3. For the sake of a better experience at school, asking his advisor for a new room assignment, missing something again. This time, we're gonna add the missing subject to make it complete, so that this sentence becomes the independent sentence. So for the sake of a better experience at school, the freshman, that's the subject that needed to be added, the freshman asked his advisor for a new room assignment. Now it is an independent sentence, and we're good. All right, the next type of problem that the digital SAT is gonna ask you related to sentences are run-on problems. So this is basically multiple independent sentences combined with wrong or no punctuation. So there are 3 ways to fix this. You can make one of the clauses dependent. You can add punctuation. There are only 3 punctuations you can add: a period, a semicolon, or a comma fanboys, which we'll talk about later. Or you can split up the sentences, which is basically period, add a period. So example 1, the dog Mary wants to put in the dog show is a beagle. It is a medium-sized member of the hound family. If you notice when I spoke, I automatically added a pause, which means I can tell something's off here. It needs to have some sort of punctuation, or we can add the word which makes it a dependent clause, right? To make a clause dependent, you can add which or because. So the dog Mary wants to put in the dog show is a beagle, which is a medium-sized member of the hound family. All right, number 2, we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna make the clause dependent. Both of these are independent clauses, right? You can't combine independent clauses with a comma. The deli had no milk after a rush of morning customers. That stands on its own. The owner rushed to order more. That also stands on its own. You need the correct punctuation, or you can add because the deli had no milk. Now that is a dependent clause. It can't stand on its own. It needs that independent clause which follows. Example 4. Air plants like the Tillandsia species, comment below how to say Tillandsia species, are tolerant of a wide range of climates. They thrive in room temperatures. So what are we doing in here? Again, we're adding the correct punctuation to be able to separate 2 independent clauses. Because each part of the sentence can stand on its own, you can't join it with a comma. You have to use a semicolon, which they used right here. All right, example 5. So in this, we're simply splitting up the sentences because they are two independent clauses and they don't really need to be combined. If you wanted to combine them, you can also add a semicolon here. All right, the last kind of problem related to sentence structures that the SAT is going to test you on is dependent subject problems. So a sentence subject might actually be an entire dependent clause. What do I mean by this? You will see in the examples, but the basic strategy is just going to be to mentally erase the dependent clause and replace it with a noun. So in example 1, whoever came up with the idea to put solar panels on rooftops are geniuses. So what is the subject of this sentence? It is the whoever came up with the idea to put up solar panels on rooftops. That's a long subject. We could cut that out and let's just replace that underline with an actual subject. So does this sentence make sense? Kyron are a genius? No. So that's how you need to know that are needs to become is, because that whole dependent clause is just one noun. And you want to replace that dependent clause with something related to what it's talking about. So whoever came up with the idea, so that's a person. You want to replace it with a person, and then test out the sentence. Let's try another example. That cleaning a kitchen is a repetitive chore, which makes it especially thankless. This is kind of hard. What is the subject in this situation? So if you think about it, cleaning a kitchen is a repetitive chore. What is that? That is a fact. That's like a reasoning. That's like basically that's just an idea. So we could replace that with the word fact. That fact makes it especially thankless. Right? That makes sense. That sentence is coherent. But you can't say that fact which makes it especially thankless. So replacing the underlined subject, which might be a long word, with something that actually makes sense is how you simplify these problems down. All right, section 2, punctuation. Let's get into this. So a semicolon, these are not as complicated as you think, guys. Semicolons are basically periods. They're never going to test you on the SAT between choosing a semicolon and a period. That is a extremely detailed breakdown that they're not going to test on the SAT because there's too many mistakes that could happen and people's futures are riding on this test. They want to make it standardized. So semicolons are used to connect related thoughts, connect sentences. So as you can see in the example, Jim rode his bike. That's a sentence. Mary walked. That's a what's it called? Independent clause. You can connect those two with the semicolon because semicolons are equal to periods. And here's a pro hack. If the text at any point in time contains a semicolon and right after one another, there needs to be another semicolon in that sentence. So if that's one of the answer choices, that's probably right. So example, we ate mushrooms. Oh, this is an example of another way that a semicolon can be used. This is the only other way. If you have a list and the list contains commas already, but you want to have a list within a list, you can also use semicolons to separate objects in that list. All right, a dash is basically parentheses, guys. So that means it's used to group information that you could completely cut out of the sentence. It's just extra little details that you want to add. So for example, the hairstylist picked up the scissors, the kind that usually sit in the jar of blue liquid. So that information is really an extra detail that you could cut out of the sentence and it'd be fine. Or you could put it in parentheses. So the reason why this is wrong is you need two dashes to match, exactly like you need two parentheses, an open one and a closed one. So you can't have a dash and a comma. Same thing with the second example, you need two dashes. And this is very similar to how you can just use two commas to cut out information that is extra details, which we will talk about a little bit later. Okay, colons are basically dashes. I don't mean this in the parentheses way this time. I mean this in the introduce something way. So for example, here's my list of acceptable pets. So the colon introduces a list. That is one way of introducing something, and the second way is introducing something related to that sentence. My search for the perfect pet came down to man's best friend, a dog. So a dog is introduced by the sentence prior to it. All right, commas. Commas can get very complicated, but basically you need to understand that if there is a dependent sentence, it requires at least one comma to be correct, because when you connect that dependent to an independent, you need to use a comma as a punctuation. Lists also require commas, and there's a comma before the and or the or. So if you say red, blue, and pink, there's a comma before and. If you said red, blue, or pink, there's a comma before or. Let's see. They can also be used to remove non-essential information like dashes, which is what I was saying. So in the first example, this one's a little tricky because it seems like Barack Obama is not really important information since you're already saying precedent, but let's try it out, right? If you have something within 2 commas, you should be able to remove it from the sentence and it still makes perfect sense. Like that was just an extra detail, same thing as the dashes. But if we removed Barack Obama, it would say US President will meet with his counterparts. That doesn't make sense. You need the Barack Obama, and that's why you can't surround it in commas in this situation. US President Barack Obama. Let's see the second example. So the daisy, a perennial plant, sometimes known as bruiseworth, grows low to the ground. In this example, if I try to remove a perennial plant, I get the daisy, sometimes known as bruiseworth, grows low to the ground. As you can tell, there's a huge pause I had to have between daisy and sometimes, but because I removed that chunk called a perennial plant, there's no comma there. So it seems like this sometimes known as bruiseworth is also a bit of extra detail that doesn't need to be there. So we want the commas to surround both parts. So the fix is the daisy, a perennial plant sometimes known as bruiseworth. That's the extra information. If we cut that out, the daisy grows low to the ground. That's a fine sentence. All right, last example. Started on a whim by an eccentric resident, the project to clean up the abandoned lot soon became a popular neighborhood pastime. So if you can see, the underlined portion is definitely a dependent clause. And what did I say about dependent clauses? They require at least 1 comma. So you can't just put a semicolon there. There has to be a comma in this sentence. So that's the fix. You just add a comma. And of course, before we move on, this is me asking you to subscribe and like the video again, because this is a small channel and we need to grow. Thank you. All right, last thing is fanboys. So if you have a comma and then a fanboys word, which is for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so, this is basically equivalent to like a period or a semicolon in some ways. So let's look at an example. I wanted something to eat, so I looked in the fridge. If you can see, there are 2 independent clauses here. I wanted something to eat, I looked in the fridge. So to combine them, you can use a comma and a fanboys word. Reading fiction is beneficial. It can make us more empathetic. The host borrowed dozens of folding chairs. There were not enough for the guests. We liked the play's story. We didn't care for its staging. There has to be a comma before the word. So if you just said, I wanted something to eat, so I looked in the fridge, that is not valid because there's no comma, and there might be the fanboys, but there also has to be the comma to make that sentence correct. So make sure you watch out for that. All right, plurals and possessives. Let's talk about apostrophes now. So the cow has a barn. That's a singular cow and it has a barn, right? So you could say the cow's barn, the cow's barn. That's what an apostrophe does, right? It symbolizes a person or thing that owns something else. It's the cow's barn. Now, what if there were 2 cows? The cows have a field. 2 cows have a field. How do you say that the cows own that field? the cows' field, right? So in that sentence, you kind of heard like an extra S almost. That means there's an apostrophe after the S. The plural cows is still there. You add the apostrophe after. So the cows' field symbolizes the possession of the field belongs to multiple cows. All right, let's talk about its. First of all, its and then an apostrophe at the end is just always wrong. That doesn't exist. Its without any apostrophes mean possessive again. So the bull has its food. So the dog is its food. You wouldn't say the bull has it is food. That's when you would use the apostrophe, right? If you want to say it is, that's when you do it apostrophe s, which is short for it is. It's near the bull. It is near the bull. All right, pronouns, basically the same thing. Their versus their versus their. So their ears are pink. That is a possessive. The ears belong to the cats, right? Their ears are pink. Their friends. They are friends. You wouldn't say their friends like, I can't even put THEIR into that. Like, there's no possessive there. It's they are friends. So you're shortening there with they apostrophe RE. Kittens are over there. They're like kittens are over there refers to like a place or a location. So that's a very different kind of there. It's like it's over there, right? So understand the differences between these. This is definitely going to be a question on your SAT, and it's free points. Your versus your and whose versus whose. Your, again, is a possession. Your key isn't working. The key belongs to you. Your key. You're at the wrong door. You are at the wrong door. This is like a shortened, it's like a, what's it called? Like a nickname almost, like you apostrophe RE. Whose, again, it's possession. Whose house is this? Who owns the house? Whose house is it? But if it's who's coming over, who is coming over? You're shortening who is. So understand that. A lot of the times apostrophes are shortening or combining a R and an is with another word. All right, that's it for this video. I want you guys to comment down below the answer to this bonus practice question. This is gonna be difficult, but hopefully you guys can take a look at this and try to figure it out. And yeah, thank you. Let me know how your SATs go. Thanks for watching, and click on this video right here to get some more insight on how to apply to scholarships using that new high score you're about to get after you watch this video.